Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of the federal government investigating the Disney Corporation for anti-white prejudice or racism, anti-whiteism. Now, this is something worth exploring in detail because it heads into ideological territory, and there are a number of points of view, if you like, that could be included in the spectrum of thoughts around this. Now, to Disney, as their activists explain it, and they've got different levels of activists, but there's the ESG level with Bob Iger and BlackRock and, that sort of thing. And then there's the more down at the street level activism of just, gay, lesbian activists and various troublemakers and grifters and hustlers. And then all the various stuff in between, people that are just being, they're probably not on board, for or against the LGBTQ woke, they're probably not into it that much, but they're paid handsomely for putting propaganda out rather than looking at entertainment. Now, Bob Iger, denies that we don't do the woke stuff. Oh no, not us. We're into entertainment. But if we can put positive messages out there, then why not? What's wrong with that? Are you against that, you Nazi? So it's very, very much how you view things and how the people in control view things, and I'll try and cover that to some extent here in this vid. Now, there's absolutely no question, absolutely none. I mean, in my view, any investigation will find Disney not only guilty, but very super guilty, mega guilty, uber guilty of anti-whiteism, in my opinion. But the Disney, their justifiers, their spin doctors and propaganda grifters take a different. So, well, no, we're not anti-white. We're not anti-white. I mean, what a silly thing to say. We're just pro everything that is not white. See, so it's a little bit different. Yeah, we're not murdering. We're just taking life. We're not committing murder. We're just ending it a little bit earlier than otherwise would have. Hey, just give us some, cut us some slack here, guys. So that they're no, I don't think they believe that, but it's a way they have. Well, we're just creating equity. Okay, so we're just supporting minorities. This is underrepresented groups. We're doing good. We're doing good things. We're the good guys. If you're complaining about it, you are the Nazis. So now, in order to do this, so let's suppose, suppose you're the head of a big entertainment corporation. You've got gazillion-dollar budgets at your disposal. You can push buttons here, pull levers there, and produce outcomes. And your intended outcome is to increase the representation in the entertainment industry. In this case, movies, TV, whatever. Increase the representation of what you classify as underrepresented groups. So underrepresented groups could be, I don't know, black lesbians or gay dwarves or whatever, but underrepresented groups. Now, you're in a white country, a majority white country, so the chances are very high that there's going to be more white people in movies and whatever than anyone else. So you'd say, well, gee, that this is a majority white country. Of course you're going to have that. I mean, do we complain about too many Chinese people in Chinese, or too many Japanese people in Japanese movies, or too many black people in African movies? Of course we don't, because they're the majority of people there. So that's kind of how things are. But only in white countries, only in white majority countries, is it considered evil and sinful to not have underrepresented groups overrepresented. So anyway, this is the thing. So listen, we're just making sure underrepresented. It's equity. We're just being fair. The downtrodden, the oppressed. We're fighting back against the Nazis on behalf of the oppressed. Let's assume even that's true. I don't believe that, but let's assume it's true. Then you would create special movies for those groups. You would have black only movies. You'd have the Wakanda movies all the time. You would have I don't know, Black Panther or something, or you'd have lesbian dwarf movies, or black gay trans movies, and so you only cast trans actors or dwarfs or lesbians. Or, you have gay only movies, lesbian only. You can do that. I mean, what's wrong with that? If giving underrepresented groups was your intention, then you would do that, and you would have, instead of taking a long established, multi-hundred-year story and franchise from Europe, medieval Europe, and so on. Instead of doing that, you would create your own. The black gay dwarf lesbian movie of sub-Saharan Africa or something, or you would have I don't know, Snow Black and the lesbians from outer space. So you could do anything there. You could create your own stuff. You could create. Shaka Zulu was actually a trans gay lesbian sort of. You got vast amount of material you could use there. Nelson Mandela was really a lesbian, or he's trans, and you could do that movie. So there's a vast amount of material you could use, and you could have underrepresented groups could have 100%. You could cast 100% in these movies. You wouldn't need a single white actor. You could make sure you only had white. A black or lesbian, or directors or producers and editors and graphic artists, and so you could do a 100% non-white cavalcade of entertainment. But they don't do that. Why not? If underrepresented groups was your burning issue, you would do that, because you could have 100% non-white representation in these creations, these new stories, and so on. But they don't do that. Why not? Why don't they do that? If that's what they want to achieve, given prominence and featuring and giving substantive roles, not only in acting but in the back room. The editing and the production and so on. Why don't they? But they don't. No, I don't know why they don't do that. Instead, what they do is they take established white, 100% exclusively, totally 100% white franchises, be it Snow White or I don't know, Little Mermaid or whatever. They take be they historical or just fiction, like Grimm's fairy tales or the Tales of Hans Christian Andersen or something. But they take exclusively European white stories, again long established, that have been in the public domain as stories for hundreds of years, or as movies for 100 years plus, and they take those, and it's those that they want to say it is the white only franchises that must have non-white representation, non-straight straight male representation, non-Christian. It is only those do we want to make sure that where the representation is non-straight white male. So that straight away tells you that they're not into getting representation for underrepresented groups. That's clearly not their objective. Is clearly to subvert and undermine, and if not eradicate, white only franchise. And that's the giveaway. That to me is the key giveaway. That is only those white franchises they want to go after. Only those that have the representation rewritten. But they're white only stories and white only nations when the whole population was white only. So why is it those you'd go after? Why don't you pick Chinese movies and rewrite them and say put only black lesbians in them? Why don't you get go after black movies and change them all to white people? So it is only white franchises, they're saying, that where the representation is an issue. So that gives the game away. It's clearly an anti-white and virulently and aggressively anti-white. So why is this so? Well, the underrepresented groups are very keen to tear down everything, the entire white society, the entire white body of work and literature and history and culture. That they want to tear that down, or to reduce, substantially, if not completely reduce and eradicate its prominence. I mean, you could maybe play around the edges of what the motive. For example, the gay lobby might have a slightly different than the black activist lobby, but their objective ultimately is the same. Eradicate the white franchises and stories and culture and history and so on. So now there's another layer of this, though, another tier of this that, and if you look at Bob Iger and the people around, I mean, the not only currently but in the Disney franchise, Katzenberg, Eisner, Bergstein, Cohen, and so on, they're the sort of people that originally began Disney and the people who are in control now are very different, and their attitudes to Gentile Christian society are also very different. Now, the Jewish lobby, again, and BlackRock and so on are very much part of this. The Jewish lobby are of the view, and the activist sort of side of the view, that another Hitler is always imminent. There is another Hitler just around the corner, always, and it's an omnipresent. Hitler's only a day away, so we have to reduce the power to irrelevance of white Christian male heterosexual society. If they don't have any power, then we are safe. We are safe for all time from persecution. And they perceive that if it wasn't for straight white male Christians, Jews would never have been persecuted. So if we eradicate the power, the cultural power, the social power, the political power, the financial power of straight white male Christians, the collective power, the organizational power, we eradicate that power, then we are forever giving ourselves safety into the future, eternal safety from persecution. Now, I think that's something that has become a mythical sort of end game for the Jewish activist lobby, not necessarily the Zionist level, but in terms of the widespread of Ashkenazi Jews and so on. So that this perception that will bring us safety, I think they're looking at it completely the wrong way. I'm surprised that people that are renowned for being so bright and well educated would fall into this I think a very childish, simplistic sort of trap of thinking. Nonetheless, now if we look at the comments of in my view, this is my view of their comments, of Larry Fink at BlackRock and Iger and all those guys in Jewish guys, and they come back to this thing of we have to make the world a better place. And you say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Make the world a better place. What does that mean? You fix the potholes in the road, or you make sure the electricity is running, or you make sure that clean water is available to everyone. They're like, well, making the world a better place. Who could complain with that? Oh, I don't know, make the world a better. But what do they mean by make the world a better place? And that's where the difference lies. Their perception of making the world a better place, the only end game of making the world a better place in the Jewish activist perception, is to limit, eradicate the power of, in any manifestation or structure, or the power of the straight white male Christian Gentile. That's what they mean by making the world a better place. And you even see this in the Jewish journalists and pretty much anyone that's been brought up and educated through the Jewish school system, and caught up in the folklore, if you will, of the Jewish diaspora, is this is their perception. And if they can do that through the entertainment industry, and they're not necessarily interested in furthering the position of blacks or lesbians or LGBT, they're just the devices that can be used to eradicate whiteism, as they would say, Christian white, Gentile whiteism. And this also is very much a part of the wider workings of this, because again, if you wanted representation for black lesbians, you would bring out black lesbian TV shows and movies and so on, and you would just create new stories. You would be out going to black writers and black storytellers and novelists and saying, look, bring me your black lesbian stories. the black lesbian astronauts invade outer space. You know, you just go into all of that sort of stuff, and that would be. But no, they have to. They have to use the claim that the minorities are being underrepresented and oppressed and victimhood, very much part of the Jewish perception of the world, and say, well, if we give them more representation, we then take away the straight white male gentile representation. Thus, we've achieved two goals at once while looking and appearing and representing ourselves as socially virtuous. Coming back now to this idea of, or as I understand it, it's a happening thing, this investigation of Disney for anti-whiteism. This needs to be the central question. Why did you go after white-only franchises and say that them and only those franchises must have the representation changed? Why didn't you change the representation in blacks and this and that? And why are you saying that in white majority countries that the people that are underrepresented are somehow victims? Why aren't you going after the Han Chinese in the Chinese? They're saying, well, we have to represent the Uyghurs. Let's make movies representing the Uyghurs and say how oppressed are. Why aren't you doing that? So it's a very much a tightly focused attack on whites only, and this is the issue. And I think any investigation, assuming it's impartial, would arrive at the conclusion that it is whites that are being specifically targeted for this. So I would argue that it is anti-whiteism, it is thus racism, and that very heavy penalties and fines, if not prison terms, should be issued here. You've been a Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.